Let's begin with a brutal truth. The world doesn't reward the most emotional people. It doesn't hand trophies to the most reactive. It rewards the most controlled, the most disciplined, the ones who feel the fire but never show the burn. You see, if someone can read you like a book, they can write your story for you. If they can predict your reaction, they can provoke it. If they know what makes you explode, what makes you freeze, what makes you beg, what makes you rage, they own you without ever laying a hand on you. And that's exactly what most people don't understand. They walk through life with their hearts wide open, their reactions wired to every little provocation, their emotions completely accessible to anyone who knows which button to push. But here's the shift. You don't have to live like that. You can become unreadable. You can become unshakable. You can transform into someone emotionally dangerous, not because you hurt people, but because no one can touch you. They can try to manipulate you, but they'll hit a wall. They can try to provoke you, but you'll give them silence. They can try to seduce, insult, intimidate, flatter, but you stay centered, grounded, unfazed. That, right there, is power. That's the kind of presence that turns heads without a word. The kind that earns respect without raising your voice. It's not about being cold. It's about being in command. And that command starts with the most important battlefield of all, your own emotional responses. Think about it. When was the last time someone got under your skin and you let them? When was the last time you reacted too fast, too loud, too vulnerable, and regretted it later? We've all been there. We've all had that moment where we look back and say, "Why did I let them get to me like that?" The answer is simple. We were predictable. They saw our pattern, they read our emotion, and they pulled the string. But if you want to become unpredictable, truly untouchable, you have to break the pattern. You have to stop handing people the script of your behavior. You have to develop the ability to observe instead of react, to pause instead of explode, to smile when they expect a fight, to disappear when they expect a breakdown. And this isn't just about power. This is about freedom. Emotional freedom, because the moment no one can control how you feel, no one can control how you live. The average person is trapped in emotional reactions, angry at comments, hurt by strangers, offended by opinions, always in defense mode, always bleeding from invisible wounds. But you're about to become something else. You're about to become a fortress with windows, open enough to feel, strong enough to never collapse. People might try to analyze you, guess what you're thinking, label you, poke you, but you will master the art of unpredictability. And with that mastery comes influence. You see, humans are scared of what they can't predict. When they don't know what you'll do next, they hesitate. They walk on eggshells. They second-guess themselves. That's when the power shifts. You no longer chase respect. It comes to you. And let's make this clear. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent on a whole other level. You still care. You still feel, but you decide when to show it, how to express it, and whether the moment deserves your energy or not. You become selective with your fire. You stop lighting matches in storms. You stop giving warmth to people who want to burn you. This is strategic energy. This is spiritual armor. This is your edge. Because when you no longer flinch at the insult, no longer react to the drama, no longer dance to someone else's emotional tune, you become dangerous. Emotionally dangerous. Not in a toxic way, but in a way that commands a room, that silences manipulators. That makes even the loudest voices think twice before trying you. You become a question they can't answer, a riddle they can't solve, a presence they can't shake. And you don't get there by accident. You build it, day by day, moment by moment. You start by recognizing the triggers. What gets to you? Who gets to you? Why? Write it down. Own it. Study it. Then you begin the discipline of pause. When someone tries to ignite you, breathe. When the insult comes, stay quiet. When the manipulation shows up, observe, don't react. And in that pause, you regain control. You rob them of their weapon. You flip the script. and they won't know what hit them, because nothing is more confusing to a manipulator than someone who refuses to be manipulated. Nothing disarms a game player like someone who doesn't play back. And nothing terrifies a predator more than prey that won't run. So train yourself to become unreadable in the moments that matter. Cultivate that stillness, that calm, that presence, because that's where your power lives. And one more thing, don't ever explain your unpredictability. Let them wonder, let them whisper, let them assume wrong. That mystery, that silence, that's not weakness, that's dominance. And if you do it right, people won't mess with you because they won't know how. You become an emotional anomaly, a psychological curveball, a calm storm. So here's your challenge. Starting today, stop being the obvious one, the reactive one, the easy-to-read one. Kill the pattern. Become the question. Be unpredictable, not because you're unstable, but because you're unbreakable. Be emotionally dangerous, not because you hurt people, but because no one can shake your center. Power doesn't scream, it whispers. And now, it's whispering your name. You need to understand something that most people never realize until it's too late. Emotional manipulation doesn't always look like an attack. It often looks like a smile, a joke, a compliment followed by a sting. It's subtle, it's layered, and it works best on those who are emotionally transparent. See, when someone knows your fears, your insecurities, your emotional triggers, they don't need to fight you head on. They just need to guide you like a puppet. They know which words to drop, which tone to use, which silence will make you chase them. They don't need to argue with you. They just set the trap and you walk right in. And if you think you're too smart to fall for it, that's exactly when you do. Because intelligence isn't protection against manipulation. Awareness is. Emotional control is. The game they play is not about facts, logic, or truth. It's about reaction. Can they make you feel guilty? Can they make you overthink? Can they make you angry enough to destroy your own peace? That's their win. And it works every time on people who haven't taken full control of their emotional system. So let's break this down. If you're the type of person who always reacts, you're predictable. If your face shows every thought, every annoyance, every flicker of insecurity, you're easy to read. If you get defensive the second someone challenges you, they already know they've got you. You're playing a losing game. But here's the twist. It's not about never feeling anything. It's about choosing when and where to feel it. Choosing who earns your reactions. Choosing how to manage that flood of emotion like a master, not a victim. Emotional strength doesn't mean emotional numbness. It means emotional command. And once you master that, the manipulators lose their grip. Think of it like this. Manipulators are like emotional hackers. They look for the back doors, the vulnerabilities in your system. And the number one vulnerability? Predictable reactions. You get silent every time someone criticizes you? That's a door. You explode every time someone disrespects you? Another door. You fall apart when someone withdraws love? That's the master key. But when you start acting outside the script, when you no longer react the way they expect, the system crashes. They can't get in. They panic. Because their power depends entirely on your emotional accessibility. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to become toxic. You just have to stop giving them free access to your emotional keyboard. If someone knows that saying one specific thing will ruin your day, you've given them power. If someone knows exactly how to guilt-trip you into submission, you've handed them the reins. Take it back. How? By training yourself to see the game while it's happening. Step 1 is awareness. Start asking, what is this person trying to get me to feel? Instead of, why do I feel this way? One keeps you in control. The other makes you reactive. Ask yourself, do they want me to feel guilty, ashamed, afraid, angry, insecure? And once you name the emotional hook, you disarm it. You look at it for what it is, a strategy, a ploy, a weapon dressed as a conversation, and then you choose not to play. You stay calm. You speak slow. You redirect the energy. You shift the dynamic. Because when someone is trying to make you feel something, the most powerful thing you can do is feel nothing. Not in a robotic way, not in a cold way, but in a self-controlled, sovereign way. You choose your emotions like a sniper chooses bullets, precisely, intentionally, strategically, and this scares manipulators more than anything. They rely on emotional chaos. You bring emotional clarity. They want explosions. You bring stillness. They want confusion. You bring focus. And that energy? That discipline? It makes you dangerous. In the best possible way. Emotionally dangerous. Because you're not just unpredictable, you're untouchable. People will start to notice. They'll test you. Push buttons that used to work. Say things that used to trigger. Create drama to pull you back into the old dance. But if you stay centered, if you no longer take the bait, you'll see something incredible. They lose interest. They lose power. And eventually, they back off. Why? Because manipulators are lazy. If they can't access your emotions easily, they move on to someone who hasn't done the work, someone who still bleeds every time they're poked. But you've built armor, not walls, not ice, but discipline. And that discipline becomes your defense. It becomes your leverage. It becomes your reputation. Because make no mistake, when people realize they can't play you emotionally, they start respecting you strategically. They think twice before crossing you. They speak differently around you. They watch their words. Why? Because unpredictability is intimidating. It forces others to show their cards while you hold yours close. It keeps you in control of the rhythm, the pace, the energy. And that's the secret no one talks about. Emotional control is a leadership skill. It's a life skill. It's a survival skill. It's not weakness to stay calm. It's dominance. And if you want to move through life with power, influence, clarity, and purpose, this is non-negotiable. So the next time someone tries to manipulate you, remember this. If they can't predict your reaction, they can't control the outcome. If they don't know how you'll feel, they don't know what move to make. You become the variable they can't control, the equation they can't solve. That's how you win. That's how you rise. That's how you become emotionally dangerous and completely free. Let's talk about silence. Not the passive kind. Not the one used to avoid conflict or hide weakness. I'm talking about the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. The kind that unsettles, that commands attention, that makes people question everything they thought they knew about you. Because unpredictability is not always about action. Sometimes it's about restraint. Most people don't realize this. Silence is a weapon, and the ones who know how to wield it, they don't need to raise their voice, slam a door, or send long messages explaining themselves. They just go quiet, and that silence creates pressure. It makes people uncomfortable. It makes manipulators nervous, because silence gives you space, and in that space, you gain power. You stop reacting. You start observing. You stop chasing. You start positioning. Most people fear silence because it forces them to feel, to think, to confront. But when you're emotionally dangerous, you use silence as your ally. When someone tries to provoke you and you respond with stillness instead of chaos, they feel it. When someone expects you to fight back, explain yourself, beg, argue, and instead, you disappear into calm silence. They don't know how to handle it. And that confusion, that lack of control, that's what makes you unpredictable. Because silence forces the other person to reveal themselves. The louder they get, the more insecure they look. The more they try to provoke, the more desperate they seem. Meanwhile, you're in control. Completely. It's not weakness to go silent. It's strategy. It's power held back with discipline. It's fire under control, and this is what you need to internalize. Emotional predators feed off your noise, your outrage, your panic, your over-explaining, your desperation to be understood. The moment you take that away, they start to feel powerless. Not because you're attacking, but because you're not playing. You're no longer available for emotional drama. You're not a participant in their manipulation theater. And it shakes them. They don't know where you stand. They don't know what you're thinking. And that mystery is terrifying, because emotional transparency gives others control. Emotional privacy gives you power. And silence? That's the boundary no one sees but everyone feels. It's the invisible force that separates those who react from those who command. You don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't owe anyone emotional access just because they demand it. You have the right to go quiet, to protect your peace, to guard your energy. And when you learn to do this without guilt, without apology, you become emotionally lethal in the best possible way. People start adjusting themselves when they're around you, not because you said something loud, but because your silence made them reflect. You stop explaining your worth. You stop defending your decisions. You stop proving your heart. Your presence says enough. That's real power. And the best part? You don't have to fake it, you just have to start practicing it. Next time someone tries to bait you into an emotional reaction, breathe. Say nothing. Watch. Let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it and see what happens. Often they'll reveal more in their panic than they would in their plan, because silence makes manipulators uncomfortable. They want noise. They want chaos. They want reactions. Take that away, and they lose their grip. But here's the catch. You can't fake silence. If inside you're screaming, raging, trembling, and you just suppress it, that's not power. That's bottling. Real silence comes from real control, from doing the inner work, from facing your emotional triggers until they no longer dominate you. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally disciplined. So don't just act calm. Become calm. Don't just hold back your words. Heal what needs to be healed, so those words don't need to rise in the first place. Emotional control isn't suppression. It's transformation. And when you've done that, silence is no longer empty. It's full of presence, full of poise, full of power. And this version of you, it doesn't chase closure. It doesn't beg for clarity. It doesn't scream to be heard. It understands that silence often speaks clearer than any speech. It lets others show who they really are. It gives you space to observe what's real, not what's manipulated. And in that space, you become emotionally untouchable. That's how kings move. That's how queens walk. Not by proving their dominance in every moment, but by letting silence do the talking when necessary. People underestimate it until they feel it. They underestimate you until they can't read you anymore. And then the energy shifts. They stop playing. They start guessing. And guess what? That's when you've won. Not by force, but by control, by composure, by not being predictable. So train your silence like a muscle. Don't use it as a defense mechanism. Use it as a form of expression, a deliberate tool. When you stop speaking to defend your ego and start choosing silence to protect your peace, you've stepped into emotional mastery. And once you reach that level, you don't just influence conversations. You influence atmospheres. Your silence creates a gravity that pulls attention. That makes people pause. That makes them think before they act. Because you're no longer available for emotional games. You're operating at a level where silence isn't absence. It's presence in its purest form. That's the mark of someone unpredictable. That's the mark of someone emotionally dangerous. And that's who you're becoming. Day by day, breath by breath, silence by silence. Let's go deeper into unpredictability. Because being unpredictable isn't just about confusing others. It's about becoming untouchable in a world that constantly tries to define you, label you, control you. See, most people live in loops, emotional routines. You hurt them the same way twice, they react the same way every time. You guilt them, they fold. You praise them, they chase. You ignore them, they spiral. It's a system, a predictable cycle. And if someone can predict your cycle, they can lead you through it, like clockwork. That's how people get manipulated, used, and drained, not because they're weak, but because they're easy to read. You have to break the pattern. You have to introduce something most people aren't ready for. Inconsistency. Strategic inconsistency. Controlled unpredictability. When they expect tears, give them silence. When they expect anger, give them indifference. When they expect you to run back, don't even look over your shoulder. When you break their expected rhythm, you take back your power. You don't even need to say a word. The shift in your energy is enough, and they feel it. Because unpredictability isn't about chaos. It's about control. It's the control to not do what they trained you to do, to not react like a program, to not dance to their emotional music. You change the tempo. You change the key. You rewrite the song. That's power. But it takes self-awareness. You have to catch yourself in the middle of your emotional reflex. When they say that thing that always gets you mad, stop. When they use that silence that always makes you chase, wait. When they pretend to be the victim to make you feel guilty, observe. Don't respond the way they want. Don't repeat your emotional history. Break it. Because the more you do the unexpected, the more you become emotionally dangerous, not reckless, not impulsive, strategic, grounded, free. And let's be clear, unpredictability doesn't mean playing games. It means ending them. It means removing yourself from the predictable battlefield and showing up in a way no one saw coming. That's what shakes people. That's what earns respect. Because most people use emotions like weapons. They throw guilt, blame, fear, silence, flattery, all to push your buttons. But when your buttons are gone, when your reaction isn't guaranteed, that's when the whole system collapses. They can't use what they can't predict. They can't manipulate what they can't map. And that mystery, that keeps you in control. You become the variable they can't code, the factor they didn't account for. It's not about being fake. It's about being free from control. Because the opposite of freedom isn't just force, it's predictability. The moment they can guess what you'll do, they own you. So you change the game. You move different. You think different. You respond with thought instead of habit. And over time, you start to love that power. The power of knowing that nobody owns your emotional switch, that nobody gets free rent in your head, that nobody can pull you out of your peace without your permission. And here's what's wild. The more unpredictable you become, the more stable you feel. Not because you're hiding who you are, but because you've finally learned to own it, to manage it, to choose when and how to reveal it. You're no longer exposing your emotional code to anyone who demands access. You've become a fortress, not a wall. A fortress. Strong, grounded, with intentional gates. And only those who prove they can be trusted get through. That's emotional intelligence. That's maturity. That's strength. And the world needs more of it. We live in a time where everyone is performing, oversharing, over-explaining, overreacting. Everyone wants to be understood immediately, validated constantly, and heard loudly. But the ones who move the world, they don't beg to be understood. They master themselves so deeply that the world has no choice but to take notice. That's who you're becoming. Not loud, not chaotic, intentional, calm, powerful, and unpredictable. Because unpredictability isn't noise, it's presence. It's not about doing the crazy thing. It's about doing the unseen thing, the unreadable thing, the thing that makes people pause and ask, wait, what just happened? That pause, that confusion, that's leverage. Because when people can't predict you, they have to respect you, or fear you, or both, and either way, they stop trying to control you. So here's your mission. Start noticing your patterns, what always triggers you, what always pulls you back, what makes you lose yourself. And then, disrupt it. Choose the opposite. Try silence instead of defense. Try distance instead of chasing. Try detachment instead of obsession. And watch what happens. Your world starts to shift. People respond differently. Your energy becomes magnetic. And you realize something beautiful. Unpredictability is not just protection. It's power. It's peace. It's identity. You're no longer on the emotional leash of others. You're no longer dancing for their validation. You've taken the lead. And now they follow your rhythm. Or they leave. Either way, you win. Because you're no longer here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be respected by those who see your strength. And that strength comes from your unpredictability, your mystery, your refusal to play the emotional games that keep most people stuck. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's emotional elevation. That's psychological freedom. And once you taste it, you'll never go back. Now we need to talk about one of the most powerful and most underestimated traits of emotionally dangerous people: detachment. Not the kind that turns you into stone, not the cold, emotionless withdrawal from life, but the focused, conscious ability to remove your identity from outcomes. The ability to say, "This situation does not own me. This person does not define me. My value is not tied to how they act or react." Because here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Your biggest emotional weakness is your attachment to validation, to being chosen, to being right, to being loved the way you imagined. And guess what? People feel that. They can smell it. The moment you need a certain reaction, a certain label, a certain outcome, you become easy to manipulate. You become predictable. You start bending, shrinking, twisting your truth just to get a certain response. And that's exactly when they've got you. But when you stop needing outcomes, you stop being controlled. You start choosing yourself instead of begging others to. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It means caring deeply, but refusing to let your emotions be hijacked by what's outside your control. It means showing up with love, presence, energy, and being okay if it's not returned. Because your worth is not a vote. It's a fact. And when you embody that, you become dangerous in the most elegant way. Why? Because nothing scares manipulators more than someone they can't bait. Someone who doesn't break when rejected. Someone who stays grounded when provoked. Someone who doesn't explain themselves when misunderstood. That kind of person is rare. That kind of person is powerful. And that kind of person is you, if you do the inner work. You have to learn to hold your own center, to stand in your own energy, to be okay with silence, space, distance, ambiguity. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Because when you're emotionally detached, your power multiplies. You stop chasing closure, because you are the closure. You stop needing explanations, because peace isn't outside you anymore. You stop performing for approval, because you're no longer applying for positions in people's lives that don't match your value. And now, you're moving differently. Suddenly, they don't know how to control you. They can't guilt you, flatter you, punish you into submission. You've seen the game, and you've walked away from the table. And that is when the energy shifts. They may try harder, or they may back off. But either way, they start respecting the new boundary. The boundary that says, "I don't chase chaos. I don't explain my standards. I don't beg for peace. I am peace." That's the kind of detachment that rewrites your emotional story. Because let's be real, most of the emotional pain people experience isn't because of what happened. It's because of how attached they were to what they thought should have happened. They wrote a script in their mind, cast someone in the lead role, and got destroyed when that person walked off the stage. But here's the shift. Stop casting people. Let them audition for your space. Let their actions be their application. Let reality lead the story, not your fantasy. That's detachment. It's emotional clarity. It's letting go of control without letting go of standards. It's saying, "You can show me who you are, and I'll believe it the first time." Not out of bitterness, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. Because when you're detached, you stop trying to rewrite people. You stop trying to turn red flags into potential. You stop overextending your energy for people who haven't earned it. You become still, intentional, focused. And that focus makes you unpredictable, because you're no longer moved by breadcrumbs. You're no longer motivated by drama. You don't engage just because someone yells louder. You watch. You wait. You act, not react. And that terrifies people who thrive on your reaction. Because suddenly, they can't find the hook. They can't find the button. They can't find the opening to control you. And in that moment, they realize You've evolved. You've detached. You've become your own source of approval, closure, and clarity. And that's a kind of power no one can take. So here's your challenge. Next time you feel that pull to prove something, pause. Next time you feel that urge to chase someone who's pulling away, pause. Next time you're tempted to beg for clarity, to over-explain, to break your boundaries just to keep someone's attention, pause. Breathe. Detach. Remind yourself, I am not here to be chosen. I am here to choose. That's your new standard. That's your new identity. And when you live from that space, you don't just become emotionally dangerous. You become emotionally free. Free from the patterns that used to own you. Free from the games that used to trap you. Free from the emotional slavery of needing others to define your value. That's not just power, that's peace. And once you feel it, you'll never settle for less again. So now, we arrive at the final stage. Transformation. You've cut the emotional leash, you've broken the patterns, you've stepped into the cold fire of unpredictability. And now, what's next? You live it. You embody it. Because unpredictability, once understood, must become identity. Not a trick, not a weekend experiment, a way of being, a psychological posture, an emotional standard. From this moment forward, you don't just use unpredictability, you are it. You become the kind of person who walks into a room and changes the temperature. Why? Because people can't tell what version of you they're going to get. And I don't mean unstable, I mean unshakable, grounded, intentional. You walk in and they can't tell if you're going to charm, challenge, or disappear. And that keeps them honest. Because when people don't know how to handle you, they treat you with caution, with respect. They measure their words. They watch their tone, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. And uncertainty creates leverage. Predictable people get taken for granted. Unpredictable people get considered. Their space gets valued. Their energy gets appreciated because it's rare, it's earned. And if you've made it this far, you've earned the right to move through the world with that quiet power. That energy that says, I don't need to impress you. I don't need to be liked. I don't need to stay where I'm not respected. That's the freedom you've built. And now it's your responsibility to guard it. You protect it with boundaries, with standards, with your presence. You no longer waste your breath defending your choices to people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer explain your silence to people who used to weaponize your voice. You no longer invest in relationships where your unpredictability is seen as a threat instead of a strength. Because now you see the truth. People who fear your unpredictability were never ready for your growth. They were never planning to respect your power, only to manage it. But now, you're unmanageable, not chaotic, just uncontrollable. Because when you own your emotional world, no one else can run it. That's your domain now. That's your kingdom. So how do you carry this into everyday life? Simple. You master the pause. You slow your reactions. You watch what triggers you. And you choose to respond, not reflex. You say no without guilt. You leave when disrespected. You don't explain your absence. You don't announce your standards. You live them. And the more you do that, the more unpredictable you become. Not because you're trying, but because you're evolving. And as you evolve, you become unreadable to those stuck in the old version of you. That confuses them. That frustrates them. But it's not your job to clarify. You're not here to be decoded. You're here to be real, aligned, and at peace. And don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean you isolate or disconnect. It means you connect from strength, not desperation. You love from wholeness, not wounds. You speak from clarity, not chaos. That's what makes you emotionally dangerous. Because while others are still drowning in their reactions, you've built a fortress of emotional sovereignty, a place where you are the authority, the creator, the controller of your own state. That's rare. That's sacred. That's leadership. And the world will try to pull you back, to test your unpredictability, to see if you'll break under pressure. Let them. Let the chaos swirl. Let the noise rise. And watch how still you remain. Watch how calm you've become. That stillness, that's the signal you've won. Not because you got louder, but because you got quieter. Not because you attacked, but because you outgrew. Not because you chased, but because you chose yourself. That's the final form. And no, it's not always glamorous. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's misunderstood. Sometimes it feels like you're walking alone through a fog of people begging you to come back to who you used to be. But you won't. You can't. You've tasted freedom. And once you've tasted it, nothing else satisfies. You don't want control. You don't want revenge. You don't even want validation. You just want peace. Real, rooted, powerful peace. The kind that comes from knowing that no one and nothing gets to pull you out of your center without your consent. That's the heart of it. That's what this whole journey has been about. Not performance, not image, but sovereignty. You are emotionally sovereign. Unpredictable not because you're unstable, but because you are so internally stable that you no longer move on command. You move when it matters. You act from purpose, not pressure. You speak when it's time, not when provoked. You love without fear. You leave without fear. You live without fear. And that's what makes you emotionally dangerous in the smartest, most powerful, most beautiful way possible.